So round 5 of the World Championship match between Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi. Jan played e4 and we had the Roy Lopez again. Knight c6, bb5, castles, and we get this position like we had in game 1 and game 3. And a4 this time again. And instead of bishop b7 that Magnus played earlier, here he played rook b8, which is not the best move in the position, and Magnus admitted as much in the press conference. So I think it's a psychological warfare going on here, that Magnus is trying to say to Nepo, I can play suboptimal moves and still hold a draw against you. So maybe he's trying to make a statement, a psychological statement, and upset Nepo. And Nepo definitely was upset, visibly upset and frustrated at the end of this game. So maybe round 5 is more than a chess game. It's a psychological game that Magnus played against Nepo. So let's see what happened. Takes, and now Nepo played h3. He's trying to avoid the martial attack, because if c3, then so much for this being an anti-martial system. Black still goes d5, as happened in Carlsen versus Duda. Because now if knight takes, and rook takes c6, and black is still able to get bishop d6 and queen h4 and get his martial going. So that's not what Nepo wanted. So he played h3 first, because now if d5, then as we have seen in game 1, take, and after this happens, white has the additional option of playing knight c3 in this position later on. So that gives white additional flexibility, which makes his position slightly better. So that's why Carlsen couldn't go for the martial and played d6, and now c3. Could have also played d3, but that's not necessarily giving anything special to white. One sample line could go like this: h6, bishop d2, preventing any knight b4 tricks if knight c3 immediately. Rook e8, knight c3, knight d5 trades, knight here attacks, this guy comes back, knight g6 and rook a7, and seems pleasant, but that's all that there is to that. It's not giving white any huge advantage. So that's one way he could have played. The other one is c3, which is what he did. Now this is already a critical moment, because let's say black plays a move like h6, then white can play d4, and now black's position is under pressure. So for example, if b4, then d5, and this guy is trapped already and he's lost. So he would have to play e takes d, c takes, and then d5, which is the normal way of dealing with these positions. Otherwise, white always has the option of playing e5 himself and then creating problems for black. So d5, but then e5, knight e4, and now knight c3 hits this guy, also hits d5, and creates an uncomfortable situation for black. Because if he takes, let's say he takes here, and takes, and now white has a solid pawn mass here, and his position is much better. But let's say he goes bishop b4, then in fact white can even sacrifice the exchange with knight takes d5. Take, he has to protect him, so bishop f5, but now bishop f4, and moves like rook c1, rook c hitting c6 and c7 are happening for white, plus these pawns in the center are really dangerous, and black's pieces are not well placed. This knight is in no man's land. He's not well protected, and white's pieces are extremely well protected, and they're menacing as well. So this is a huge position for white. So that wouldn't work. So to solve this problem, black plays b4, because now if d4, then first of all black trades on c3, and after this trade you can see that already black has some pressure on this bishop, which makes life just a little more difficult for white. In addition to that, now he can play e takes d, and after c takes d, d5, e5, well, e takes d is nothing because knight takes d5 and black is completely equal. e5, knight e4, and as you can see, there is no pawn here on b2 anymore because that was traded on c3 this way. So there is no knight c3 in the position as a result because the knight would be hanging. So that's how black solved this problem of d4 being so menacing, because now white has no good way to challenge this knight. Which is why Nepo couldn't play d4, so he played d3 and says, okay, I'm going to play a slow game. And Magnus traded and he got his pressure on this bishop. And Nepo says, okay, I can play slow. And Magnus plays d5. Now, he was hoping for e takes d, but Nepo didn't fall for it, because if takes, knight takes, and rook takes, then bishop e6, and now white has some serious problems. Because let's say he plays a normal move like rook to e1, then knight takes e3, hits the queen, and after takes, bishop, and he's won his pawn back, plus he's got the two bishops. So this bishop being loose here is the problem. So let's say he protects that with bishop c4, but then black has bishop f6, which hits this guy. And now after he moves, knight takes c3 comes again. So that's not working. And in fact, if he, let's say he goes rook e2, then black would even play rook takes b1, take, and knight takes e3, forking all three pieces. So this is problematic for white. So he has to take this guy out of the game and lose his two bishops. He's got an extra pawn, but then black has the two bishops as compensation, and this is not an easy position for white to play despite the extra pawn. So Nepo didn't go for this. Instead, he played knight d2, which makes a lot of sense and keeps this tension alive, puts some pressure on Magnus's position as well. Magnus relieves the tension, and now he played here bishop d6, which in hindsight is a slight inaccuracy. I can see why he played it. He wanted to strengthen this point and free up this knight to move here, maybe knight g6. So because let's say black played h6, right? Then white could play bishop a4, hitting this knight. And now this knight's the defender of that guy. So if this guy's taken out, that guy's falling. But as it turned out, that was not such a big problem, because now black could actually play rook a8. And he cannot take here because rook takes. And let's say he tries to solve that with bishop b2, then black has bishop e7. And after take, black can take here, no problem. And if he takes this pawn, then first trade the rook. And at the end of this, he has bishop takes e4. Because now if knight takes, then first queen takes queen, then takes, and then takes the knight, and black is completely equal. So there was a tactical solution to the problem. The other point of the bishop being on d6 is here in this position, Jan could have played bishop a4 himself. And if bishop d7, then knight c4. And now you can see that these two knights are pressuring e5, plus this knight is pressuring that point. And black would have played something like knight, maybe queen e7 or something, but he's parting with his bishop pair, at least black. And white's position is far more pleasant to play. So this could have resulted in a good position for white. There was another line with rook a8, same idea, but again knight c4. And after bishop e6, at least he gets the two bishops white, and the game's far from over, but it's an imbalance, and it's an imbalance that is in favor of white. So this could have been a dangerous position for black. So bishop d6 was slightly inaccurate for that reason. So the other point with rook a8 is that now knight c4 doesn't work because queen takes queen simply. And then rook a6, how about that for a defensive move? And this is completely fine for black. So let's go to the game. Bishop d6. Jan played slowly with queen c2, and h6 was played by Magnus. Now after knight f1, knight e7, knight g3, knight g6, bishop e3, queen e8. He's getting ready to trade this bishop, and this was the critical moment in the game. Now Jan should have played c4 to create some pressure on black's bishop. Because now let's say if, first of all, if let's say bishop e6, because you can't play c5 because he's got bishop takes b3, white could simply sidestep that with bishop a4, and after queen moves, c5 here, and black's position is passive, and white could play a move, let's say like queen c3, hitting this pawn, and as you can see, the pressure is slowly but surely mounting on black's position. You can play an accurate move like knight h7, but then this knight is quite passive. Let's see another move. So he's threatening c5, so imagine bishop b4, but then rook b1. Now he has to deal with this guy being in no man's land, so c5. Otherwise white plays c5 himself, and then he is stuck here forever. c5, then bishop a4. And now if he allows this trade, then white's position is completely dominant because d5 is weak. He's got the a file. This knight's extremely well placed. And if he doesn't allow the trade with queen e7, then bishop c6 could happen, with bishop d5 being an idea. In fact, that's also a line when black plays c5 in this position. Because if bishop a4, and let's say queen e7, bishop c6, now he's getting ready to sit here on d5 and create lots of problems for black. Because let's say queen c7, bishop d5, and if he takes at any point, then he has simply opened the c file on this pawn, and white could gang up on that guy, and this guy could be in some serious trouble. Plus he's got squares like knight d2, knight c4 here. So c4 was the move, but Jan missed his chance and played the tame move rook d1, and Magnus was super relieved to see this, and bishop e6, and offering a trade of this bishop, which eventually happened in this position like this. Could have played rook takes a4 too, but then rook b2, and he has to part with the rook anyway. So he decided it's better to go into this rook endgame and maybe have some play in the endgame. I thought when I saw this for the first time, I thought white has a slight advantage. But as it turned out, Magnus played brilliantly. And even though he played this in a passive setup, this passive setup was enough to hold black's position. And at this point, there was nothing that Jan could do. Knight f5 came eventually. But Magnus just stays here, defends his pawn. This knight is beautifully defending c7 and d6, and the bishop's holding e5. So this structure stays intact, and there's nothing else white can do. So he tried knight c4, but rook d8 holds him again. f3, just holding e4, but that's nothing. f6, defending e5. And now the game slowly but surely moved in the direction of a draw. If Magnus drops his bishop back, he's going to bring his knight out, trade another set of pieces. And black's position is completely fine. Black can't play for the win here, but white has nothing to play for either. And let's say, for example, if knight takes d6, then rook takes, and the king may get to d5, but then there's always this knight to kick him out of d5, and it's drawn. So the game concluded with bishop to f8, and if it played a few moves, obviously you don't want to take here and create an imbalance, or rook b8 or rook a8, and now simply shuffling back and forth, and the players agreed to a draw in this position. So psychologically speaking, a huge victory for Magnus, achieving this draw with a slightly inferior move, rook b8, although Jan could have played c4 at the critical moment and got an advantage. So I think this will be a slight psychological blow for Jan Nepomniachtchi. It'll be interesting to see how he deals with it, and whether that has an impact on him or he comes back stronger. So I think game 6 is going to be an interesting one to see. So looking forward to that one.